Hello, this is Rock Our World, episode 90, the 7th Trumpet. First, I'm going to go back with a couple of additions. The first one, I just was reminded, and I'm speaking in the sense that I feel the Lord reminded me about this morning, about the key of David. That's going back to the letters, the one to Philadelphia, the church that I've said is the first army, the bride of Christ, that is being put together, beginning as we speak and going on for 3.5 years. When its completion comes about. So the key of David, you can see what the key of David is in Isaiah 22:20 to 25. The problem was, up to this point, for me, is that I didn't understand what that was saying in Isaiah. It says what the key of David is. It's obviously authority. So I was reminded of it this morning, and two scriptures came to mind immediately. One was Ezekiel 34, where the Lord dismisses the shepherds with the wrong hearts, and he raises up to authority. He puts in authority those that he has trained already in the wilderness, shepherds after his own heart. And then also I was reminded of Daniel 12:7, I should say, Daniel 12 verse 7, where it uses these words that it's referring to the time, times, and half a time. That is the 50 years of the tribulation. I've gone through that in other episodes. What that means, it doesn't refer to the 3.5 years, though there is a distinct 3.5 years with the very first part of the tribulation. Anyway, at the beginning of this tribulation, which is, I'm going to say, is immediately ahead of us, in many senses it started some time ago with the birth pangs of the Messiah. But anyway, in Daniel 12:7, it says, and you have to best go to the JPS, a more modern translation. It says that the power of the holy people will stop being shattered or stop being broken. In other words, up to this point, those shepherds in Ezekiel 34 that were trained by the Lord weren't given the authority up until a certain point. They're trained and ready to go. The ones that are in authority are the present day church with all its things that are put in place within Christianity and Judaism, and that's all been put in place by men for the most part, although God is well aware of every detail of it. He's working with those who allow him to. But there's an exact point in history where the authority changes hands. And that's what the key of David is talking about. And that is, I'm going to say, during the events of the fall festivals this fall. The first one being the Feast of Trumpets on September 23rd. The next one being the feast, the Day of Atonement, the fast day, the day we need all to be fasting, on October 2nd. And then the fall festival of trumpets from the October 7th to October 14th, if I got my numbers right. You can go back in other episodes. I talk more about them, more details. This is when authority, the key of David, is passed to this group of people that God has trained in the wilderness, and their power will stop being shattered. That is, they go from not having authority yet. It's been given up to this point to the church, which includes the Jewish people in their systems, their religious systems, and the Christian people in their religious systems. That authority is ended on that during the fall festivals this fall, and then these group that have been trained in the wilderness will take over the authority. So that's just a revelation came to me this morning. And again, this is my opinion. I trust that the Lord is guiding me, and I pray that you will go to the Spirit of God, that you'll go to the Father in your prayer closet, and you'll ask Him about these things. Your life depends on it, both your physical life and your spiritual life. On that note, I'm going to point you to two programs that Lynn Liaz posted on YouTube. They're very disturbing. Take those to the Father too, in your prayer closet. And if you're not familiar with that term, that simply means prayer. And you can do it whether you're in a dark room in a little corner of your house or under a tree, or you're driving down the road. You can do it anytime you choose. You just, in your heart and your mind, you start talking to the Father. And He will listen to you, and the more holy and clean you become, the closer you can get to Him. So make sure you leave room in your heart to allow the Torah, the instructions and teachings of the Lord, to guide your life. Begin guiding your life. This isn't about becoming perfect in one fell swoop. It is about allowing your heart to be softened. Actually, it'd be real good right now to go through these scriptures. I've gone through them many times. Go to Jeremiah 31, 31 to 34. This is what the new covenant is. The time the Torah would be written on our hearts and minds. Go to Matthew 5, 17 to 19, where Yeshua, Jesus Christ, said, anyone who breaks the least commandment in the Torah and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom. And then go to Malachi 5, 4 to 5. The very last 2-3 verses in Malachi. And read how the Lord, as the last days begin and unfold, He says, remember to follow the instructions of my servant Moses, the Torah, the teachings and instructions of our Lord. Anyway, back to Lynn Liaz. Watch these two programs. One is entitled An Urgent, Horrifying Letter from Military Friend. The other is called Shocking Military Letter Confirms the UN Plans to Destroy America and More. I'm not going to say everything in there is exact, nor is everything I say exact. We are looking through a glass darkly, but there is more and more reason to be very concerned, very alarmed, and your preparation is on your knees before the Lord. And allow your heart to be changed. Okay, that was the key of David. And now we're going to, I did a little bit of modification on what I said about how the trumpets and the seals. I'm going to say that the trumpets are more, you could describe them as events, the 6 trumpets, whereas the 6 seals that preceded them could be described more as a process that has a distinct beginning. So I've used the word synopsis, overview, and recap. That is what we're going to do today in the 7th trumpet. That's the words I would use. Synopsis, overview, recap. Go back over some of the events with greater detail. Jeremiah 31, 31 to 34, the spirit of Elijah, the white horse, the apostolic movement that the modern Christian church has referred to. The apostle is the sent one, and that is sent by God, not by men. You will recognize the apostle because he's putting in order, things in order using the Torah. The false apostles will say the Torah is not legitimate. So, the true rapture. What is the true rapture? Adds detail of believers who have died and are raised first. Okay, that's what my note to myself. When you look at the true rapture, not the pre or the mid, and of course it's a word men invented. I've gone to the two scriptures, one in, I believe, Thessalonians and the other in Corinthians, I believe. Anyway, go back in my episodes, look them up. They match exactly with the end of Revelation when it says, and you put these scriptures all together, that in this event, that all who have died in Christ are raised first. That is, all believers who have been approved of by the Lord and are part of this great army, they rise first from the dead. They're given physical bodies, and then together with those who are still alive, they rise to meet the Lord in the air. That's the second last event of the entirety of the tribulation. So, in other words, the true rapture is the second last event, right on the 50th year of the tribulation. And the last event is when all the believers stand beside their commander-in-chief and destroy the evil enemy. All the people that are left alive, led by Satan and the demons and the fallen angels and the aliens. Got to keep throwing the aliens in. Aliens are demons. They're all destroyed in one fell swoop. So that was just a few points to start off the 7th Trumpet, chapter 10 to 14. This is a span of the full 50 years and the birth pangs before. So in other words, it actually includes more time than just the 50 years, because birth pangs have gone on for a long time. I'm not going to say that, give exact dates, but some of the things had distinct beginnings. For instance, the white horse, I've talked about quite a bit, started to ride in southern Saskatchewan almost exactly a year ago, in the beginning of September, when we started the Full Gospel Businessman's Good News TV program. Started airing all over the world. Two programs that myself and a friend did together, and then there was one other interviewer, Larry Molesky, that interviewed me. Those two programs, you can look them up on Good News TV, and the White Horse began its ride when it was talked about and revealed that we are supposed to be observing the Torah. We are supposed to be keeping God's festivals, His appointed times, His Sabbath, not the Sabbath of the Christians, nor the Sabbath of the Jewish people. The Lord's Sabbath is different. It follows His calendar, not the calendar of Babylon. And we are not to be keeping the festivals of Baal, which include Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. And just to help give the Jewish people a bit of a push, Purim and Hanukkah are not instructions from the Lord. They're not. There's many things amongst this that is not evil. It's just that the Lord does not ask us to do these things. And He definitely tells us not to be involved in Baal worship, demon worship. So, I better get speeding along here. Chapter 10 talks about the bittersweet message. I've talked about this quite a bit. This is a very, very difficult message for the church to receive, and it's being sent out right now as the tribulation begins. So that's the bittersweet part of it is that it's really telling the church that 9/10 of them will not go along with God. They will stick to their old religious teachings. They will refuse to allow their hearts to be softened. They'll refuse to take part in the new covenant, which is Jeremiah 31 to 34. Their hard hearts will keep them from moving forward, and they will lose their lives in the tribulation. That's very bitter news. The judgment is not for the world. It is first for the church, for the people of God, and secondly for the world. And God's desire is that the entire world picks the right side. So this is a bitter message. Another aspect of the bittersweet is that the 1/10 that do receive this message, they will get so excited about it that with the revelation, just like the first love is, but they will be rejected by 9/10 of their friends. So that's a couple more aspects of bittersweet. The full plan of God becomes clear somewhere in this point of chapter 10, as the seventh angel is sounding its trumpet. These are some of the points of the full plan, that the tribulation lasts 50 years, a full Jubilee cycle, that the role of the Torah is right up front, that Yeshua is the living Torah, and the written Torah is to be observed. And the Torah does not include what the Jewish people call the oral Torah. That is a man-made fabrication. And then Yeshua, the revelation that Yeshua is coming as a warrior, and that the church is or are the soldiers. The book of Joel describes this army where everyone follows their orders perfectly. And as you can see, they receive the orders intuitively. That is, they hear the voice of the Lord. This has been a long process, really. The entirety of chapter 10, in a sense, started when Yeshua came as a suffering servant, so it's been going on for 2,000 years. So that was the letter to the exiles. Who is us? The church. The Jewish people, the Christian people, and everyone else is invited. So let's go to chapter 11. The specific job of the spirit of Elijah. It began a year ago with these two shows I mentioned on Good News TV. Look them up on the internet. One Eye was interviewed by Larry Molesky, and this other one I interviewed a friend of mine, who you'll catch his name when you watch it. He's a soldier in arms with me, and our two ladies, they're our prayer warriors, and they got our backs, and we got theirs. Now, where am I here? So this specific job of the Spirit of Elijah is chapter 11. The message is escalating. This YouTube channel and 7,000 others are doing this work of voice crying out in the wilderness. The job of Elijah, the Spirit of Elijah, was performed by John the Baptist during Yeshua's first coming, and it will be performed by these 7,000 in this last coming of the Lord as a warrior. He's coming as a warrior. I mentioned watch Lynn Liaz's. She's, I'm going to say, is amongst the 7,000 crying out in the wilderness. Watch her two programs I mentioned. Actually, I mentioned three. One earlier, a policeman, a heavy-set guy with a really thick mustache. He has been hearing from the Lord. Take all these things before the Lord in your prayer closet. The two witnesses bring out the message loud and clear in the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. The 6 trumpets span these 3.5 years. This is the passing of the Lord's indignation. That's Isaiah 26, 20, and 21. And it's obvious there's protection for the obedient. And by obedient, I don't mean you got everything right. But what you got right is that you've allowed your heart to be healed by the Lord. And that's found in Ezekiel. Read all of it. The healing of our hearts, the taking away of our stone hearts. So chapter 11 ends dramatically with the judgment coming upon the people of Jerusalem itself. Remember, judgment begins at the house of God, so the Christians and the Jewish people are being judged first. God approves, it's obvious that God approves of the 2 witnesses and their message, the message of Elijah, return to the Torah. Yeshua said, when he was describing the end-time events in what Christians call the Gospels, it's actually the good news and the hope of the kingdom. He said, flee to the hills when you see these events happening. These 2 witnesses die, and this abominable object is set up in the Holy of Holies in the temple that's just been built 3.5 years ago. And he says, flee to the hills. 1 escapes and 1 is left behind. That's where that comes from, that left behind thing. And the ones left behind are the ones that die. The ones that escape, that they see this thing happening, they have knowledge, they've been pre-warned, they've had their hearts softened. So this is the judgment of the Jewish people. 7,000 die in that great earthquake. And the greatest decision-making spot in the tribulation, as the whole world watches on the news, the internet, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and whatever else they invent in the next 3.5 years. Everyone will see all these things transpire. It will be the catalyst for lots and lots of people to make a decision to go with one or the other. Are you going with the Lord? Are you going with the beast power? Are you going with the deception of the Antichrist, of the New World Order, of the evil that has been put together behind the scenes by an elite group of people? So chapter 12 is a pause and a recap. At 22 minutes, I'm not sure I'll get through all this, but it could very well take a couple to get through this section of Revelation. Revelation 12, 1-4 is the great sign from heaven, and I'm speculating we'll see this exact thing, or maybe it's more like we'll all know about it. And if you go on YouTube, there's just endless predictions about September 23rd. That is the Feast of Trumpets. It's a single day, not a series of days like the Jewish people believe. It's a single day. It is the first day of the 7th month that Enoch describes in very clear description and detail. It is the day after the equinox. That is the first day of the 7th month. It is been predicted, and David Mead talked about this, and I go back in my episodes, how this is exact configuration when the baby is born. And if I got my facts right, it's actually the planet Jupiter comes out in this configuration out of the womb of the woman, which is Virgo, and there's 12 stars at her head. You'll be able to see them. And there's the moon at her feet. The small crescent as the new moon cycle begins its journey. Whether we see it or not, many people will be and are keenly aware of September 23rd. Now, I'm going to speculate that that's the day that this planet X, Nibiru, the brown dwarf star, which is a red color, eclipse the sun and blocks out. I don't think it's big enough to block out the entirety of the sun, but it eclipses the sun, comes in front of it, and darkens the sky. I think that's possible. That'll happen that day. It'll be a great sign and a great wonder, and then people will be researching and they'll realize this great configuration only happens only once in all of history. Now, what that is a metaphor. God created a metaphor in the heavenlies, and it describes the wrath of Satan as he knows his time is short. It goes on to Revelation 12, goes on to show that there's protection for the woman who is the church. And remember that I just described how the key of David is saying the leadership of the church just changed hands. The Ezekiel 34 pastors who eat the sheep are dismissed, and that's all the leaders within Christianity and Judaism are dismissed, and the ones that the Lord has prepared ahead of time are given authority. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in the system today is dumped. They have the choice to let their hearts be changed as we speak. And I'm going to go with the Lord's indication that 1/10 will make that switch. They'll accept the Torah as the standard of our conduct. They will begin teaching about the Lord's festivals instead of the festivals of Baal. Some already are. And they'll make that switch, and they will be approved of by God, and they'll remain within the leadership somehow, or at least amongst the bride or the second army. So the protection of the woman is referring to the church, the people who are obedient. And that doesn't mean you got everything perfect. I've been talking for now 90 episodes about the things that have been restored so far that I know about. There's others that would know more than me, or other details, and the Lord will lead you to them all. But you don't have to have all these things in place. You have to have a heart that is willing to accept them as you learn. So that's who the woman that the Lord protects, is these obedient people with soft hearts. And this is a 3.5-year period as the Lord's indignation passes. It would be good actually to do a word study on indignation from the old King James. That's a word I just looked at it this morning in my concordance, good old Strong's concordance. So that'd be a good thing, a good project. Look at that word, or whether it's just one word in the Hebrew or not, I don't know, but that is very specific meaning, the passing of the Lord's indignation. He's bringing all these things about in a very dramatic way for a 3.5-year period. Chapter 13, Satan, the demons, the aliens that work for the 50 years span. It includes the beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist, the New World Order, the mark of the beast, and these same obedient people I'm talking about, that they don't necessarily have everything perfect. Well, none of us do, but we have, hopefully I'm including myself, have hearts that are soft. You will know what the mark of the beast is. It might be this chip, it might be this, that. I don't know, we're 666. I'm throwing my opinions out there, but you will know. The obedient people will know. Chapter 14, the first army of 144,000 is now complete at the end of the 3.5 years. This is Joel's army. The second army continues to fill for the rest of the 46.5 years. Chapter 14:6 now begins the second stage of God's end-time drama. The first was to establish the bride in the first army, now to preach the good news and the hope of the kingdom to all the world. Babylon begins to fail, that is the New World Order. people are choosing sides, switching sides in this great showdown of the ages. The wrath increases against those choosing the wrong side. Go back to Jeremy's story. Try and find that on the internet. The righteous are harvested for the full 50 years. And in fact, let's include a few years before, as the birth pangs began to increase. I keep coming to mind the destruction of the Twin Towers, which more and more evidence says it was an inside job, not necessarily by the government, but factions within the government, this elite I'm talking about, creating this new world order. That was an orchestrated event, and I've heard it said that that was the true beginning of the red horse. So anyway, there's a beginning to the tribulation, and then there's the birth pangs that preceded it. So the wicked are harvested in a moment of time. This is overstated. At Yeshua's return, the resurrection and the meeting in the air of the believers, both the ones that have died before and the ones that are still left in time. So there's this contrast in this final step. The righteous took 50 years to be harvested, and the wicked took a moment to be harvested. I'm out of time, so I'll go to chapter 15 and expand upon what I just said. This great harvest takes up most of the 50 years. So this is Neil Buchanan with Rock Our World.